Hey, how's it going everyone? Welcome back to Keep Fish Simple. So in today's video, we're going to be doing the second episode of my How to Breed Bettas series. Now, if you guys haven't watched the previous episode, there's going to be like a link, I think it's up here or up in one of these corners, there's going to be a link. Basically, we've bred our Bettas. Now, we were trying to breed two pairs, we only bred one so far. I'm still conditioning the other pair, which is like a blueberry koi pair, they look really cool. We're still conditioning them, but we've gotten a successful spawn. Now, the male's still taking care of the eggs and they've just started to hatch, so I'm going to quickly show you them. And basically in this video I'm going to show you guys the whole process and basically when to remove the male, and we're going to do the first feeding. And then in the next episode we're going to do I'm going to kind of take them up to a size where they're taking baby brine shrimp and they're a little less finicky, and then we'll just do frequent updates on the babies after that. So without any further ado, let's go have a look at the eggs slash wiggler babies. Okay, and so here we are, and you guys know in the last episode how I was telling you he's a terrible bubble nest builder. Well, here is a perfect example of that. Now, as you guys can see, there's some eggs up here, but this guy is just a terrible bubble nest builder. Now, most of the eggs have actually fallen to the bottom, which isn't too much of a worry because he's kind of moving them around, trying to put them back up, and he's just fighting an uphill battle at this point. So there's just a bunch of these eggs down the bottom. And it's been about, I think, just over 24 hours, maybe it's about 36 hours since these guys were fertilized by him, and they've just started to hatch. Now, you're not going to be able to see that too well, but there's one or two of these guys which have started to hatch, and I'm guessing within the next 12 hours they'll all have hatched. Now, when that happens, I'm going to remove the male just because, I mean, he's just really derpy and kind of sucks at doing his job. So we're going to do that. Most of the time, a lot of breeders will actually leave the male in there for quite a long time until they've done their first feeding, and then they'll take them away. But I'm just preferring to kind of like take him out and let the fry kind of sort out their own lives without him, because yeah, he's just not doing much work for these eggs. He's really a terrible bubble nest builder. Okay, so it's now the next morning, and as you can see, all the fry are formed, and there might be a little bit of egg yolk, like sac, left for them to absorb, but they've for the most part done all of that, and they're going to be eating within the next 24 hours, I'm guessing. So the male has pretty much finished his job. He's done a great job. He's put all of the fry back up in this nest. You can see them all. It's actually quite amazing seeing all this. So they're all up in here. There are a few that keep falling down here, but he's done a really good job at putting them all back up in the nest and keeping them organized and making sure they stay out of trouble. So we're going to remove him today, and he's going to go into a separate tank where he can get a little bit of food and, you know, heal up, because this whole time he hasn't been eating, so he can recover and we can then start to care for the fry. Now, there's just a ton of infusoria in this tank on that rotting leaf and in that java moss, and I might go around to some of the other tanks and get some sponges and just chuck them in here, because they're going to be full of little microorganisms that these fry can eat. But for the most part, the care of the fry is relatively easy as long as you do everything right. So let's remove the male and we'll talk a little bit more about the fry. Alright, so we've removed the male, and now basically all we have to do is care for these fry. So now I reckon within the next 24 hours, like I said before, these guys will be taking some microworms, but for the moment in time they're just too small and they're still absorbing their yolk sac and learning how to swim horizontally, so they're not going to be needing any food. Now, what I like to do, and what I've been saying for this whole video series, is using the big tank is really beneficial, because you can utilize it to culture infusoria without having to have an infusoria culture. So culturing infusoria isn't too difficult, and if you want to give it a try, there's plenty of videos on YouTube where you can learn how to culture infusoria and paramecium and stuff like that, which would be a really good first food for these guys. But when we have this much tank space and such a lengthy breeding process, tons of infusoria forms naturally. So things like adding the Indian almond leaf, which you can see in the back there, it starts to decompose and it actually forms a ton of little microorganisms and things like that, which the fry then feed on. Also having things like this java moss, which has just tons and tons of microorganisms on it, also helps. And you can't see it up the back, but I just added as well an old sponge from a sponge filter into here, just because there'll be just a ton of little infusorias on that as well. So these guys will go around the tank and they'll feast on that until they're big enough to start to take those microworms. But what I like to do is, because the microworms can survive for such a long time in the aquarium, I like to feed them as soon as possible, because even if they don't eat them, they're going to eat the smaller ones, and the bigger ones are just going to be ready for when they are a little bit bigger and they can graze on them, and you don't have to worry too much about feeding them like 4 to 5 times a day. So not a hard process. I'm going to keep you guys updated with these fry over the next however long until we can start to feed them, and then in the next episode we'll do more like intensive care on how to get these guys up to a size where they are a little bit more hardy and less finicky. So I'll see you guys in a couple of days. So it's another 24 hours later, and these guys are all free swimming now. So you can see the little tiny specks. They're actually so tiny that my iPhone camera can barely pick them up. So it's very hard to see them, but there's tons of these little tiny specks just throughout the tank. Now what we're going to do is we're going to do our first feeding of microworms. So I've explained microworms, I said it probably earlier on in the video, like it's not complicated at all. So I'm going to leave it up to you guys to find out about the microworms in the other videos. But basically we're going to do a feeding, so we're going to see how they react to it. A lot of them won't actually be able to fit some of the microworms in because they're just so small. So all that Java moss and that sponge up the back from a sponge filter is just going to be packed full of infusoria for these guys to munch on for the next couple of days until they can take the microworms. But let's go give them a feed. If you've never seen a microworm culture, this is what it looks like. It's basically a disgusting tub full of mashed potatoes, yeast, things like that. There's a whole video, like I said, and basically all these things on the side are little tiny worms, and we're going to scoop them up and we're going to feed them to our little baby bettas. So that's what's going to be the first food for us, and after this food we're going to start to feed baby brine shrimp. Alrighty, so now we've got a bunch of tiny little micro life swimming around the tank that the fish can eat. So you don't want to go crazy overboard and just feed a ton of this stuff because it can start to foul up the water. So you want to be a little bit cautious with it, but really a lot of this stuff, like all these microworms, will stay alive for a very, very, very long time underwater, and they're not going to foul up the water. So basically these guys are now going to eat this. This is their first food, and then they'll probably eat this for the next week, and then we can upgrade them onto some baby brine shrimp when they start to really put on some size. So that's going to be pretty much it for this video. In the next episode we're going to be growing them up a little bit more and getting them up to a decent size where they're a little bit easier to take care of, and then from there on we're going to do some updates on this batch of fry just so you can see the whole process and the growth of these guys. And yeah, that's basically it. So thank you so much for watching this video, guys, and I'll see you in the next one.